All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. We're starting 5 minutes late, not too bad, 6:05. Welcome to policy. If, just so everybody knows, if you haven't attended a policy meeting before, this is a working session, so we're going to go ahead and go through the agenda. And the idea is to not only take a look at the policies that are up for review, but also discuss some revisions or improvements to existing policies. Everyone, policy members, as well as any public that's here with us tonight, I please encourage you to engage and to collaborate along with the process. I will say, if what you feel you need to say is not appropriate for a classroom or a work setting, that you refrain from that dialogue here in the room. If you feel like you need to step away and then come back, I invite you to do that as well. And with that, Dr. Russell, we will go to attendance.
I have recorded attendance. We are
Fabulous.
set there.
Great. So 2.01 is the cycle policies for review, Dr. Russell.
Catch up.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're moving just a little bit slower. We'll get there. Okay, so for this evening, for this evening's policy committee meeting, we are coming back to our review cycle, and the district reviews every board policy once every 6 years. And we were ahead of ourselves and investing some time in some other policies, so we haven't seen review cycle policies for a while on the agenda. This evening, you will see 4 from the 00 section, which is really the board section. If we go to policies, they're local board procedures, and we'll look at 4 of those this evening as part of the drafts. And really, there are no changes being recommended by administration except for Policy 002, based on a recent change at the state level where students up to their birthday and turning 22 are now eligible to attend school. It used to be 21 through 21. So that was changed earlier this year. That's the only change that's being recommended by administration to these 4 policies.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, is everyone comfortable then moving those along?
First reading?
Great.
Excellent, thank you.
3.01, the legal and PSBA, PNN recommendations.
Yes. So policy 254 had a slight change. We saw this policy last month, and this came out of a PNN. They've updated the compact, so some additional language, and they've included individuals who are part of the Space Force, and that's now listed as part of the organizations that could be recognized by schools and consideration for their enrollment, as well as withdraw. Administration would recommend the adjustments or the revisions proposed by PSBA to this policy. Any questions on policy 254? If we jump to 815, the acceptable use policy, so this is a policy that came back once it had gone to the board for a first reading, came back in January, and we had some good discussion around some of what the PNN or PSBA was recommending, and administration has looked at those suggested revisions, and I'll pull up the draft so that we can all see the draft, and administration is recommending the committee consider implementation of some of those recommendations. So the changes would really fall under authority, and to strike this section here where the board establishes the following list of subject areas as inappropriate matter. And there were some good reasons as to why this wouldn't make sense in all cases. And the other argument in support of striking this would be that we cover what is described as harmful to minors under federal and state laws, as well as what is defined as obscene. But as was mentioned last month, there were good arguments in favor of striking this section in the event there are students conducting research on any of these topics or reading about it in a student handbook. And these documents exist online. So it doesn't line up exactly with the practices and the reality of some of the circumstances of our students. The only other change that administration is recommending to 815 would be to get rid of inappropriate matter because it is subjective in our view, and instead go back to the language of the law, harmful to minors or obscene. So wherever you saw inappropriate matter, administration is recommending striking it and replacing it with harmful to minors or obscene. Those would be the changes since the last time we met.
Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the proposed recommendation? All right. Moving on to 903.
So 903 came out of a PNN, it's dated February. This PNN references public participation in board meetings, and PSBA is actually recommending a shift in the title to public comment in board meetings. And there was a case, they've cited the case, and there was an injunction filed in response to what occurred in this situation. And based on that injunction and some of the actions that occurred, they're really trying to make very clear what the public is entitled to as part of a public meeting and making comment, as well as what the presiding officer is entitled to do, or how the presiding officer might guide or lead when public comment is being offered. So I can pull up the draft to illustrate some of these points. So administration has taken the PSBA version, and it is proposing to adopt the PSBA version with the selections that have been made throughout the policy. Oftentimes they afford the district choices, and those choices have been selected with the X's. You'll see them in green. And there are some details about, for example, individuals wishing to comment shall sign in on the sheet provided at the meeting and provide the following information: their name and municipality. That's what the district asks currently. That's what administration is recommending we continue to do. Oftentimes you hear our presiding officer make a statement about the format for public comment and the desire to keep it respectful. That's also called out here. It is identified in the policy that each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. That's consistent with the practice currently. And commenters cannot cede their time to others. Individuals may not speak on more than once on the same topic. That's our practice currently. And all statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. There are times when a commenter will sometimes turn around and talk to the public. Actually, this policy explicitly describes comments are to be made to the board. In the event there are challenges with some of the commentary that occurs, there is also explanation here in the policy about the rights of the presiding officer to regain control or manage the situation. Any questions?
Dr. Weston?
Yeah, there's some new language under authority that I'm not completely in agreement with. Actually, I'm not in agreement with at all. Towards the bottom of the first page, under the authority section, we have the line that says, the board requires that public comment on agenda items be made at the beginning of each meeting. And then on the second page, we go to, the board shall have a second public comment period after the items for action or deliberation have been completed to comment on items of concern or other matters involving the school district. This is not in keeping with the practice that we've had for a couple of years now, where we've had comments on any topic before and after the regular, the meeting topics. I think this practice has served the board well in the past. I think it served the community well in the past to have opportunity for comment on any topic, both before and after the meeting. And I'd really like if we could keep the direction there on public comment as we currently have it.
So if I could, Ms. White, speak to that. As I read under authority, an opportunity for district residents, so I'm at the very beginning, the top of the section. An opportunity for district residents and taxpayers, employees, and students to provide comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation, which are or may be before the board, led me to think it included any topic of interest.
Well, that part does.
Okay.
I agree with you there, but then you get down below where it separates it out, saying, before the meeting starts, at the beginning of the meeting, you want people only commenting on agenda items. And then after the meeting, you're opening it up to any topic. Compare, I have a little trouble getting it on my phone here, but if you could compare that to the current language.
So,
the
Dr. Weston, are you looking at where there's an X, the board shall provide a second public comment
Yes.
period? That's
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
No, he's not. Right above. Right. See where it says copies of the agenda in bold?
Is your mic on? Okay.
Yeah. See where it says copies of agenda in bold?
Yeah,
Right
You-
underneath that. The board, and then bolded requires that public comment in bold on agenda items be made at the beginning of each meeting.
yeah.
But
Your
Yeah, but it's not
spec-
eliminating comment on any topic.
It's pretty much is. You can,
It's requiring that the comment is only about an agenda item.
yeah.
no, I don't see it. I think you have to have public comment on agenda items at the beginning.
But this one seems contradictory.
That's
though.
not what we do, though. We have public comment in the beginning and public
Yeah, I
comment
know.
at the end.
But the board requires that public comment on agenda items be made at the beginning of the meeting. How would you change that?
Well, I would keep it the way it currently stands in the policy.
Yeah, our policy currently says that you have an opportunity to speak 3 minutes in the beginning and 3 minutes at the end.
Right.
It doesn't stipulate what you're allowed to speak about.
So,
I was
Dr.
reading it
Weston,
more though as, if you want to make a comment on an agenda item, make sure you make it before the board takes action. That's the way I
I
was
think
reading
that would be that would be the insinuation, but I think to your point, Dr. Weston, you see that it's limiting.
It's
I think-
limiting the limiting comments at the beginning of the meeting only to agenda items.
But it doesn't
No,
say only.
understood, and I think that when we had conversations about this previously, I don't know that we had them at policy.
I don't know.
But we have had conversations about the comments in the beginning of the meeting kind of,
You could change the word require to the board suggests due to the sunshine law that public comment on agenda
yeah,
items
I was
be
just
made
going to say we
prior
could
to
either
each.
strike that sentence or we could just revise it to have it be more explicit. I don't know that, to me, I think it's a little redundant because there's a whole, the blurb above, two above is to provide comment on matters of concern, official action or deliberation.
Yeah,
That's already written.
that's already there.
Right.
It's just it
Contradicts.
specifies what is appropriate before the meeting and what is appropriate after the meeting. Like I say, just refer to the current policy, refer to the active policy, see what it says there. It says something like the board shall have comment on any topic before and after the meeting.
Right, the bold font. I'm sorry, the bold font indicates new language, so you're right. If you take out requires on agenda items, the statement reflects what you just described. This language is a bit contradictory in my view. I wonder if we could just, as Ms. White suggested, strike this sentence. The board requires that public comment on agenda items be made at the beginning of each meeting.
I think the way that Mr. Saylor was explaining, I think that wasn't a bad suggestion in the fact that I think it's kind of allowing the heads up to be, if people have something to say, should the public, maybe it's to say something like, should the public have a comment about an agenda item? the board requests that it be made at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, then that,
Could add it here if you want.
You don't think that that fixes it?
I think that's an unnecessary thing, and by, it implies that you don't want people commenting on agenda items
At the end.
after the meeting, like actions that have been taken on agenda items.
Or, well, I know, but then it says lower, it does say that.
The,
Technically, that's no longer an agenda item because it's already been, the action's already been taken.
Right, and it says any action or deliberation that has been completed to comment on items of concern.
Yeah,
The-
the change
the-
is based on a new law that they highlighted that says if you're going to do something to the agenda based on the Sunshine Law, regardless of what section it is, you need to give the public an opportunity
Right.
to vocalize that prior to you taking action.
Correct.
So that's why the new stipulation 4 is different than the previous policy. And that's what they're stipulating, that you're forced by law prior to taking action, mandating that you give the public an opportunity to speak on that said action.
So maybe that's what we add to this statement. I don't know what you said before, Mr. Saylor. The board
the-
requires that public comment on agenda items be made at the beginning of each meeting before action
Suggested.
is taken,
Yeah.
suggested.
Yeah.
How do we feel about
The
that?
other draft version, there's two drafts of 903 in the policy section of board docs. There's the PSBA version, which is the marked up version that you have, and then there is there's another one where the sentence just reads, "The board shall require that all public comments be made at the beginning and end of each meeting."
Yeah, but Dr. Weston, the law changed. They made a slight edit to the Sunshine Law that mandates that even if in the middle of a meeting you decide to add an action item, you then have to reopen public comment. So that's what the onus of that change is.
I'm not, so if you're adding an agenda item,
So they two things. They made it harder to add an agenda item mid-meeting, but if an agenda item is added after
24 hours.
yeah, let's say an
within-
agenda item correct, after 24 hours you need to enable public
Or
comment
within 24 hours, I should
within
say.
or yeah, correct. Or let's say for an example you do public comment and then the solicitor says, "You know what? We forgot we needed to add this item." The new Sunshine Law says you have to re-allow public comment to anything, but yes, it gives them the opportunity to speak to that.
Before any board action is
and
taken.
I'm not sure that the new language covers that possibility, that contingency.
I don't think it's clear, but I think, as Mr. Saylor is citing, that's, I believe, the intent, that you need to make sure that the public is afforded an opportunity to comment on any amendment made to the agenda before the board would take action on that amended item, if it happens within 24 hours of posting the agenda.
It's restricting boards who might not allow. Some boards in Pennsylvania, not right now, but they changed it, but some boards in Pennsylvania allowed a general public comment before the meeting. Not necessarily. Some boards in Pennsylvania say, no, we had this policy meeting on Tuesday. That's when we did public comment for the policy items. We're not doing it today. We had education meeting. That was when you were afforded the opportunity. You can now talk on other. This is now saying that at your business meeting, you must have a public comment period on the agenda items. You can't stifle that. There are some boards out west that, for instance, had a policy meeting today, right? And we have conversations on policy. So then at the business meeting, they would say, no conversations on the policy agenda items. We already did that yesterday.
That should be an unacceptable practice.
It is now because they just changed the law.
Well, that's good.
So, Dr. Weston, what would you be comfortable with regard to the way that it's worded? And would you like a laptop, by the way? They're on the front.
I
Okay.
I couldn't find mine,
It's
so
okay.
it's okay. I've got my phone here. It's
Okay.
okay. Don't need it.
I know the service is not super.
Sometimes they're a little slow too. Well, quite frankly, I like the original language. The board shall require that all public comments you could say public comments on agenda items as well as comments on any topic be made. It just seems very restricted. It seems restrictive the way it is currently written in the policy.
So
The way the draft is presented.
So again, I mean, I would be okay with striking that one sentence because I think its intention is covered in the section above it.
Okay, yeah, strike that particular sentence.
The board
and-
requires.
Yeah, yeah.
the other option that I would offer is that at the end of the sentence say, prior to the board taking action. That's another way to look at it. That speaks to the revision in the Sunshine Law, or to the Sunshine Law.
Does anyone else have an interpretation of the vernacular? Dr. Dietrich?
So, Dr. Russell, do you mean the board requires a public comment, the opportunity for public comment be provided before the board takes action and not talk about when? Is that what you meant?
So actually, it really is only when there's been an amendment to the agenda. So it really gets into more detail. Technically, I feel like the paragraph above under students covers the board and comment opportunities.
I would agree with that.
So I don't know that we need the statement at all. I think we could strike it. Do you agree?
I think we could.
Okay. Is the committee comfortable with striking it, the statement?
Yeah, because Title 65 is just saying that we give reasonable, so we are still giving reasonable.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other comments with regard to anything in bold? There's a section about when public comment can be interrupted or terminated. Does anything there stand out as needing to be added or deleted in anyone's mind? Okay. So if that would be the only change,
Sorry. A quick question about the sign-in process. It says, you have to sign in to speak. Are we still going to afford people the opportunity to speak if they don't sign in and sign up to speak?
so my impression of that would be yes. So the way that it's currently working is that sign-in sheet goes to a sheet that I have in front of me, and then the people that actually have said they wanted to speak, they speak first, and then once those people are exhausted, we open it up to anyone else. One time only, of course, yeah. You don't think that precludes any?
I want to make sure, Mr. Jagger, which statement are you maybe referring to? Because I don't want to limit that through the policy language, since that is the will of the board.
I believe it is above where you are.
Okay. This one, the presiding officer may expand the opportunity to provide public comment to others when deemed necessary. So I think that might cover us, unless you see somewhere else where it limits us.
I believe it was up higher. It was below the bold that you were just on before.
Okay.
Oh. It says, all individuals wishing to comment during the board meeting shall sign in on the sheet provided at the meeting and provide the following information on the sign-in sheet: name, municipality.
Yes, that section.
So
yes.
we could add
You.
under guidelines on page 2. Oh, it doesn't look like that on yours.
Okay.
Yep, right there.
Got it.
So we could add an additional line that says, that's a good question. So, so you don't want to limit it based on the language.
No, there's a statement above that indicates
Choose one of the following two options.
the presiding officer may expand the opportunity to provide public comment to others when deemed necessary to inform the board. So something along those lines could be included in this section so that it doesn't leave people believing if they didn't sign in, they can't talk, they can't offer comment. Or indicate with a raised hand.
Okay, so it says individuals shall wait to be recognized by the presiding officer for comment and must direct all comments to the board, therefore must preface their comments by mentioning.
You could just say all individuals wishing to comment during the board meeting should instead of shall.
Yeah, we could do that, or even add or raise their hand. And it really goes to the board, the presiding officer. Or does it go to Laurie? Okay. And then, I think it goes to Laurie and then you. So then, here, do you want? Oops,
So I
changed that.
guess,
That right.
can we make it more of a statement? All individuals wishing to comment during the board meeting shall be given the opportunity to do so, period. And then, or comma, by either signing in on the sheet provided or by acknowledgement of the presiding officer.
Yeah.
You could say it that way, right?
Okay,
And
right.
then that just leaves the discretion up to,
So say that.
because we do still want people to sign in, I think. But to your point, even if that you haven't signed in, the reason you state your name and municipality is because it's recorded on the record for the secretary.
Right. Shall sign in on the sheet provided at the meeting or.
Wait for acknowledgement. Or something along those lines. All right. Were there any other, thank you for that addition, that was helpful. Were there any other areas that anyone wanted to discuss? There's a section, response to public comment. All right, seeing none?
Are we
Go ahead.
cutting people off? It says commentators may, no individual may speak more than once on the same topic. So that means they, on their second go-round, they're not allowed to speak?
That's not how I read it. Hold on, let me go back to it. I just read that line. Now I'm not going to find it. I read that to mean in the same section.
We don't allow people to speak
Right.
in the same section.
So it says here, no individual may speak more than once on the same topic under public comment. Individual shall wait to be recognized by the presiding officer. And then underneath some of the choices. And then I checked in either public comment session.
What am I missing?
So,
Oh, I see it now.
so I was attempting to avoid what you are wondering might be in the language, no individual may speak more than once on the same topic in either public comment session. So they can speak on the same topic at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, but not twice at the beginning or not twice at the end, is how I read that.
That's how I read it when I read it the first time too, but I guess, I mean, but when you point it out that way, then it's ambiguous. So, you can just uncheck it. I'm sorry, Tammy, you just have to listen only. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, there's 4 of us here, yeah. But thank you for coming.
Could, based on the language here, could an individual speak more than once on different, could an individual speak more than one time covering different topics each time?
No.
I think we do that.
3 up, 3 down, that's it.
So, Wade, do you remember it used to be 3 minutes after every single section?
Oh, I remember that very well, yes.
Yeah. So then we moved to this other beginning and end model, right? So I think it works for the most part.
If you're really parsing out that sentence here, no individuals may speak more than once on the same topic in either session.
Well, that's what Mr. Saylor's saying. But the way that I read it was the way that Dr. Russell,
Yeah.
I think, intended it, was that they can't speak more than once on the same topic either time.
No, you can speak on topic A in the beginning of the meeting, and you can speak on topic A at the beginning of at the end of the meeting.
Right.
But it sounds a little bit like this would let somebody speak on topic A at the beginning of the meeting, and then take another 3 minutes to speak on topic B, which
Oh, also at the beginning of the meeting.
also at the beginning of the meeting.
Understood. Ms. McGee.
Something along the lines of just Can it just say something along the lines of speak twice, once in the beginning and once at the end of the meeting?
What
We
if
should
we
really
just
just
topic?
get rid of that.
On the same topic, just
You-
get
you should
rid of.
just- that comment's missing something. I would have to go back to the PNN because it has an odd comma in there. That line should just be stricken out. There's no need for it for what we're trying to put together.
Well, the part that's struck beneath it, unless all others, is probably the end of that original choice.
Yeah. So again, this you have to look at the onus of what this PSBA form is. Most school districts in Pennsylvania allow 90 minutes or 120 minutes or 60 minutes of public comment, and then each person gets time, right? Beginning and end. That's what they allow. So that makes sense. If you allow for 200 minutes in total public comment, beginning and end, it has to be 200 minutes. You're not going to be able to come up at the end of the meeting and speak about the same topic that you already spoke unless everyone else has. I would just strike it out because it's not for what we do at Perkins Valley.
You're suggesting strike the entire statement, no individual may speak more than once on the same topic in either public comment session.
No.
I would strike out the no individual may speak more than once on the same topic, comma. Just literally strike that out.
But then there's in either public comment session. That was the choice made.
Yes, it goes, commentators may not cede time to other individuals. Oh, yeah, I would also strike out in either public comment session. Yeah.
All right, so you would strike it all. The other option would be no individual may speak more than once in either public comment session.
You have to use the microphone.
I think that's more pertinent to what we want. We want to give people the opportunity to speak, but we don't want people, filibustering necessarily.
Well,
So you say you can speak once in the first session, you can speak once in the second session, and that's,
all right, so let's take it for the top here. So individuals shall wait to be recognized before commenting, must direct all comments towards the board, and then here are the choices. So each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. So
Right.
that was chosen. Commenters may not cede their time to other individuals. That's chosen.
Right.
And then below that, the no individual should speak more than once on the same topic. That shouldn't be a comma, it should be a period, and I think that should stay, but the one below it, I think, should go, in my view of it. Because there's no other place that it says that no individual should speak on the same topic more than once. but that is the practice.
You're still leaving it open for people to speak more than once on different topics in either comment session.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so it could say,
There's an easy change here. You could say, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to, each participant is limited to 3 minutes in.
total.
No, 6 total.
Oh,
Yeah. Each participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in each section, section A and section B, because I already mentioned the 2 sections at the top. So it already mentions that there'll be a period prior to the agenda items and then a period after the agenda items. And then that way, you could just disregard the comment section, or either in either section, because because above you're just going to say each participant shall receive 3 minutes per speaking section, per public comment section, because that's what we allow. 3 up top, 3 at the bottom. And then you still keep commentators may not cede their time to other individuals. Or you can just conglomerate that to one and say, commentators may not cede their time to other individuals. Each commentator will receive 3 minutes prior to the public agenda and 3 minutes after the public agenda.
Shona.
Would it be easier to just strike out the part that says more than once on the same topic? Because then it would be commenters may not cede their time to other individuals. No individual may speak more than once in either public comment section. Just cross out on the same topic.
So I think the way that Dr. Russell has it worded now. Wait, she's still thinking. I think it reads all right. Do you want to read it out loud or?
So, what if we say each commenter shall be afforded 3 minutes at the beginning and end of the meeting in the public comment sections of the agenda?
Thumbs up. Good stuff. Okay.
Strike this.
All right. All right, were there any other comments with regards to revisions of language? All right, seeing none, is everyone comfortable with this going forward to first read then? Right? All right. Good stuff. That takes us to 4.01, right? Did I miss anything? Nope. Okay. 4.01 are the local policies review. So the first one up is 109 resource materials, Dr. Russell.
Thank you. Administration is really hoping that we can move this policy to first reading after this evening's conversation. And again, just to review, there have been some concerns about some of the content in library books. In the recent Policy 815 that came out as part of a PNN from PSBA, there was language that was very specific to depictions and identified under state and federal laws harmful to minors. So it's administration's suggestion to incorporate some of this language so that when there are pictures of a sexual nature or sexual content that are incorporated or included in library materials, that they be prohibited. and that they not be a part of the library collection. I have met with the librarians. They are in agreement with this and the language from the law. So the last time we met, we had pulled a definition from a different source. The suggestion, the recommendation of administration tonight is to use the language from 815 as it appears and the language of the laws that are cited there, so that there is consistency and alignment between the two policies. Excuse me. So this number 1 under selection guidelines is where you will see the changes or the revisions that are proposed and look different from last month.
After reviewing the revisions, does anyone have any comments or concerns with regard to the changes or the suggestions? None? Okay,
Very good. We'll move that to first reading.
that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving along. 720 and the accompanying AR, not the accompanying AR, the AR 103-2, administration is reviewing all policies for connection. Existing regulation is aligned and is under review based on suggestions brought forward. Dr. Russell, if you could just give us an update.
Sure. So we don't have an updated 103 as an AR this evening. However, the committee as well as our board has been introduced to what is administration's efforts in the administrative reg 103 AR-2. And it is to, in an effort to be transparent about some of the accommodations and allowances that are permitted in our schools, that language was included, as well as what to do in the event of some sort of question or concern about behavior. It was noted in a very explicit format. There's been some feedback that I've received about that I would like to take some time to review with the individuals who have presented it. And I'd like to share that with the board in the future as well as the committee. I recognize the board does not typically approve administrative regulations. This is a very sensitive topic, though, so I want to certainly make sure that you're aware of how administration is approaching that transparency through the language. So in looking at other policies that are connected to some of the concerns, some of the questions, some of the commentary that's been raised during the course of conversations around restroom use, locker room use, we are looking at policy 104. It's a sister policy to 103. 103 really references students. 104 references discrimination and Title IX violations of staff. It has 2 attachments that are a part of it that outline in pretty great detail how to file a report when an infraction is observed or has occurred to an individual. Policy 146 describes very generally student services. We provide a plethora of student services. Some of the language in Policy 146 has been revised, but these student services spill over and really support our students in all sorts of situations with all aspects of their development. And finally, in Policy 907, administration is suggesting some language about during school hours, visitors to buildings are typically not using multi-use restrooms. I learned this from principals, that they recommend any individuals who are visiting the building during school hours use single-use restrooms, that they don't go into the multi-use restrooms. We are codifying that practice in the policy language, as well as visitors to the schools and locker room use. So, again, the effort is to really make the connections to some of the conversations that have been held over time and with revisions that are appropriate based on the conversations incorporated and brought to the committee. And we've started with these three: Policy 104, 146, and 907.
Are any comments?
I just have a question. I just want you guys to clear this up for me. Why are we doing an administrative regulation for the bathrooms instead of a policy? What is the difference? What is the advantages of doing that?
So the board, if it's the will of the committee and the board to develop policy language around restroom use, they have the prerogative to do that. Right now, administration has recommended an administrative reg because the language is incorporated currently in Policy 103 in terms of this protected class, affording administration the authority for the accommodation or the allowance for transgender students, or in any of those other protected classes, there are accommodations afforded through the language in the policy. It's very general, it's somewhat vague. The AR attempts to be a bit more explicit and address some of the concerns that individuals have raised about potential risks or potential safety concerns. The board has the authority to actually turn that into policy language should they choose to. I've actually polled districts in Montgomery County, and many of them afford transgender students use of restrooms aligned to their gender identity, and that accommodation or allowance is afforded through other policy language, whether it's 103, 151, 832. Some have policy language specific, as you're suggesting, to transgender students. That would be up to the committee's recommendation and really the will of the board.
Right, so I'll speak to that piece of it with regard to the way the conversation went, Dr. Russell, in your absence on Monday, last Monday. What I'm hearing and what I think is very serious are the behavioral concerns associated with some of the different ways that elimination of a policy, 720 hypothetically, well, not hypothetically, but 720 specifically, but then other policies hypothetically, what behavioral concerns may come up because of that. And so my request was for, through the policy committee, administration to bring back recommendations that would address and codify how behavioral concerns are addressed. And so I feel like that's the reason that you brought forward ARs as opposed to creating new policies.
That's correct. And administration relies upon, as do staff, even the public, because the public accesses administrative regs when they file a complaint. That's an administrative regulation that they are actually implementing or relying upon to communicate information. So the administrative regulation is the manner in which policies are upheld by administration, staff, students, etc.
So in hearing the behavioral concerns that people have, which are terrifying, honestly, and actually, outside of our borders, we hear about them pretty much, it seems, weekly in the news, if not daily. What I want to attempt to do is support our teachers, staff, and administrators in actually executing with specific guidelines, codified guidelines, the procedure that needs to take place if there is an infraction in behavior that negatively affects anyone in our buildings. So 104, for example, that is about, that's like 103, except it's as it pertains to staff. So staff should be afforded the same protections based on their serving in the school district as our students are. And visitors, we were hearing a lot of concern about, well, what about visitors? So in allowing for administration to empower staff with written language, I guess my question is, what else would you prefer to see happen?
I'm just trying to figure out what the difference is, really. Is an AR almost like an executive order? Is that basically what it, in a simple term? And can it be changed at the will of the administration without public notification?
So the answer to the second question is yes. although we are trying to post all of our ARs and make them public as we review them. So as policies are reviewed, the administrative team is actually also reviewing the administrative regs and trying to be more transparent, and has been over the past several years. So you'll see some policies have them, some don't. But yes, administration typically develops the AR, and a lot of them come from PSBA, and we work from them. Some of them are customized to the district. We do have the authority to change them. It is often, though, something I have made a practice of informing the committee about. So again, an effort to be transparent. It does not have the teeth of policy, though. Administrative regs are written really in layman's terms, and they help us to know this is how you uphold policy. But they are not policy, so there is a difference there. There is a delineation.
And I think based on the conversations that we've had about the concerns and the feedback that we've been hearing, Dr. Russell, is my concern first and foremost really is about safety for everyone. And so that includes staff and administration and buildings. So my concern, based on hearing worries about behavior, I wanted to make sure that our teachers weren't left without marching orders, codified marching orders. Not that they didn't know what they were doing before in the first place, but that there's actually something for them to lean in and say, if I see something and I need to address it, these are the exact same steps. What I think the revisions to this AR will afford the school district, in my view, that a policy wouldn't, although you say it doesn't have the teeth, but what I think it will afford us the opportunity to do is actually track behaviors and look for patterns to address the root cause of some of these more concerning issues.
Certainly the language will do that, but I want to make sure that the committee is well aware each building has a system for reporting infractions. Secondary levels, teachers put them in a system, principals put them in the system. That system, our student information system, turns out a report that goes to the state every year. It's called Safe Schools Report. You can see that. It's public information. It's on PDE's website. So we are obligated to report infractions. They are categorized, and then that information goes to the state. And it's not just our word, but the 3 police jurisdictions or forces around us have to sign off on an MOU and say, this is accurate. The school district is reporting accurate information as we know it. So for example, if there is a weapons charge or an assault or some serious infraction that they got involved in, they can actually validate the information. They must sign off. And we need to submit that every year by June 30th. At the elementary level, we have school-wide systems of behavior where we're really trying to cultivate and nurture positive school-wide behaviors. So there is a system for supporting, in SWIBIS it's called, infractions that might occur. So there is a system for reporting. I think another advantage to explicitly explaining that system is that parents see it now. Parents now know this is how things operate if they have a question. The details of exactly which form or whether it goes right into the student information system or on the form first are a little different. Everything ends up going into a system.
It's me again. I got another question. The administrative regulations, is that for every school, or does every administrator within that school, say the elementary school, the middle school, can they change them to suit their school, or is this something that is completely district-wide? And where would parents find this information?
Let me show you some examples. If I go into board docs, and I don't have to be logged in for this, so if I log out and I go into the public site, and if I go to the policies tab, this is the policy manual. My administrative assistant is working on an administrative regulations manual, if you will. She's building it now, but for now, we have them attached here. So if you go to 103, this is a policy we've been talking about. This is the reporting form. That's an administrative regulation. So if I have been discriminated against or sexually harassed. That's what I would report that information on. A parent objection letter. This is when a student's going to be interviewed. And then these are the guidelines that we've developed. And again, looking at feedback and considering feedback from some different sources. So this may change. But where you will see the administrative regulations that administration has developed are attached, and you have access to those as a public individual. Here's curriculum development. Here are the administrative regs that go along with that process that really help individuals who review them to understand how the district upholds policy, the responsibilities on the part of administration, and the information for our parents who may be interested, community members. In some cases, it's a reporting form. If I go down to the 900s and I look at 906, public complaints, the administrative reg is this is what you submit a public complaint on. So there's a form that's considered an administrative regulation. So they're a little bit different sometimes. Sometimes they're directions, they're guidelines. Sometimes they're actually the forms that are completed when information needs to be submitted to the administration. They are referred to as administrative regs, and the ones that we have reviewed and feel are ready to align to the policies are all posted, and they're public. Eventually, we'll get them into this manual that my administrative assistant, our board secretary, is developing and building. She wants it to be easy. So she wants it to be listed, and we believe it'll be easier for the public. If you click on this and go to the administrative regulations, then you would see a listing similar to when I'm in the policy manual, numbered.
So with regards to 103, when I went to go look, as we were developing the agenda for February, the only thing that was attached there as an AR for 103 was the actual Title IX document where you would make a report for a Title IX complaint. So my question became, well, what happens though? Like what happens before the report from the time that it happens in the building to the report getting submitted to Mr. Moran? And so that's sort of how the fruition came to be of these are the steps to take. Right. Dr. Weston.
Just to comment, really, the way you're describing the administrative regulations, it sounds like it's very much like when I used to work in pharma, we'd have standard operating procedures for doing various aspects of the job, and that's how. Sounds like the ARs are in many ways analogous to a standard operating procedure. The policy tells you what we're supposed to do, but the AR is the SOP, the procedure for how you do it. And as the superintendent, that's kind of your job to figure out how to implement the policy.
I would say that's a very accurate description and comparison, yes.
I lost track of which one we were on. I think they rolled in.
Yeah, we
Okay.
were sort of talking about these are, I think the delineation between an administrative regulation and policy is an important one. And that individuals around the room are aware administrative regulations are public. We are making them public as we update them. And again, want to be supportive and helpful of how individuals need to uphold policy or report something.
So Dr. Russell, I understand you still are going to have then more conversations based on some of the feedback because the AR went live and then some feedback was collected. So can you map out what your thinking is there?
Yeah, so what I was thinking, I did meet with some individuals who provided some feedback today. I received some feedback last week. So I can actually work on a new draft and share it with the notes, and the committee can take a look at it, and then maybe we can continue the conversation. Either at the board meeting, at the board level, I can inform the board of what administration is recommending based on the feedback, or we can come back and talk about it at committee as well. I would leave that to you as the presiding officer.
Yeah,
Defer to you.
I think Mr. Saylor brought up some good points on Monday with regards to some of the language needing to be tightened up in 103. I would like the whole board to weigh in collectively with suggestions or things that they see that are either contradictory or missing. I don't know if the rest of the committee has an opinion about that. whether it be discussed here or at the board level for the whole board? Okay, so then that's what we'll do. And then that way, we don't have to do it piecemeal. You can kind of just do it and be done with it, hopefully. Or be done with it and move on to the next one.
Okay, so let me work on some of those updates. Happy to share them with the notes, and then also bring it to the board's attention in March at the work session.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So that ends, and no one has anything else? Go ahead. Just the microphone, Mrs. Sheridan.
Sorry. Do I have to say my name and my township?
No, you're good, just
Okay.
for the purpose that they can hear you on the video.
I was just curious on the selection guidelines where it says resource
So
materials.
we're going back to 109, just for everybody following along.
Right. But it says libraries taken out. And then when you go down to 1, it says materials shall be suited to the varied interests, abilities, reading levels, and maturation levels of the students to be served. But then it crossed out is any book, and it goes on and on and on about sexual acts or as defined. And why was that taken out? Why was that taken out? And why was library taken out? What does that mean that the teachers can at their discretion pick anything they want if they think that a child is interested, has the ability, the maturation, and the reading level?
So I can speak to that. There is some professional decision-making on the part of our teachers, yes, although they must follow the guidelines and the materials must meet the criteria as represented in this language. In recent policy committee conversations, it was recommended, this policy was originally resource material, so we wanted to cover everything that comes before our students, not just library materials. So we've sort of gone back and forth with this policy. It started out as a resource materials policy, shifted to library materials. Now we're backing it up. We want this consideration, these considerations made for all materials, all resource materials that come before our students. So it's really to broaden it and to make sure that the language is considered not only for library materials, they are resource materials, so they fall under that heading.
I guess the problem I have with this is, with my interpretation of it anyway, is a middle school child's teacher gave them a matrix, an assignment that they had to do, and it was a matrix that is not allowed. When the parent went to the teacher, she said it was not on the assignment. I mean, it wasn't something that the school told them to do. It was her choice. So then she went to the principal, and the principal basically said the teachers have leeway, and they have other areas where they can get their information. So I guess by taking this wording out, it seems to me that the teachers have a lot of leeway to do something that parents would not agree with, and we really have no way of knowing unless the child comes home and tells you.
Mrs. Sheridan, can you help me to know which language you're talking about specifically?
Taking out taking out library, and then saying any books where it says materials shall be suited to the varied interest, abilities, reading level, etc. You left that in, but then took out any book, magazine, all the way down to and policy 815 is prohibited. To me, when I read this, it says to me, a teacher has the ability to present any of this to a student if she thinks he or she is capable, is at the reading level, the maturation level, or the student could be served by. Am I making any sense?
Judy, go ahead.
So I think part of the confusion is that line that you see struck out where it's referring to 815, if I recall correctly, this information that's here in the green is actually the language from 815. So instead of saying go look at 815, we're simply pulling that language into this policy so that it is this is what I'm understanding is happening, that this is what's in 815, so it's just harmonizing it as opposed to eliminating it. So it's, again, materials, and it's, following the definition under law for what's considered harmful to minors.
So, Mrs. Sheridan, so I think your interpretation of the first paragraph there, what I'm hearing you say is that your concern is that they would give carte blanche to any teacher to provide any materials at all. But underneath, in the next paragraph, it goes on to then list everything that would be unacceptable with regards to a resource material. Do you see that part there? So I don't know if that speaks to some of your concern. I mean, I think the concern is valid. I just, in good faith, I don't know that our teachers are looking to peddle salacious material.
Experience, so
Yeah, you mentioned that. So was that a firsthand? Can you talk a little bit more about that? It was really out of context.
well, I can't, because I was with a group called No Left Turn, and she came to me.
So did it happen here in our school district?
Boyertown.
Oh, in Boyer. It was not here. Okay. So we're going to make our language to reflect what we need to get done here. But so you have an awareness of it based on a situation that you heard about, is what
Right.
you're saying. Okay, understood. Thank you for the
I was
context.
involved with.
Mrs. Sheridan, if I may, because I think your point is well taken. In number 1, under selection guidelines, that statement, any book, magazine, pamphlet, was administration's last attempt to address what we view as inappropriate depictions. That's not the letter of the law or the language of the law. What we've done now in that green paragraph that you see underneath is taken the language right from the law, and as represented in 815, and we've copied it over into 109, as Mrs. Lofton referenced as well. It refers to all materials, not just library materials, but all materials. And so that's the expectation.
Quick question. Resource materials, do you think you could define that more and have that written out in the policy to say what does resource materials mean? It means materials for the classroom, the library, just so that there's no gray area there. Thank you. Missed that.
Any other questions or comments? Concerns about the language?
Ms. White, is the committee comfortable moving 907 forward to a first reading? Going back to local policies, 146 does have some revisions to the language in that policy as well, in addition to, I'm sorry, it's the AR. Let me double check that. But is the committee comfortable with moving 907 forward?
So jumping away from 109 again, we're back on to 907. So I don't have any issue. Dr. Weston, Mr. Saylor, Mr. Keenan? Okay.
Okay, excellent. The others are administrative regulations. So
Right.
it's 109 and 907. Excellent, thank you.
So we can move both 109 and 907 forward. Thank you. Great. That is the end of our local policy review. 501, the committee notes will be posted. Our next policy meeting is March 19th. How about that? That's bananas.
I had a quick question too.
Oh,
On-
go ahead.
I know Dr. Russell said she's going to be modifying the AR 103, but in the wording of what I had seen on it, it's kind of vague to me. What is the vetting process of allowing somebody to use a bathroom that identifies with their gender? Like I saw something about consistently identifies. Who defines consistent? What is consistent? I mean, my opinion of consistent and your opinion of consistent could be two totally different things.
Yeah, Our counselors work pretty closely with students that identify as transgender students, and they consistently identify if administration becomes aware of, or if someone reports students who are not transgender or consistently identifying with a particular gender, then there are questions asked and it's investigated. So our staff, particularly counselors, know these students, and any behaviors that raise questions, we can certainly inquire further about that.
But like I said, I mean, that still opens consistent up to the counselor. So now it's the counselor's opinion of consistent.
You know, we're not seeing necessarily students that are shifting in terms of their identity. In the case of our transgender students as part of our population, we're not observing other students in any way falsifying their identity. There aren't habits that are occurring to our knowledge. I am aware that some have learned of some concerns. Administration is not aware of them. Any questions on the part of students or staff should be brought to administration, and they will be investigated. But right now, we are not observing students who go back and forth and take advantage of a system or policy language. It's not happening.
Well, I understand it's not happening right now, but the door is now open for that to happen. And as was stated by Ms. White earlier, seeing it in all kinds of districts outside of here, it's not happening in our district yet, but it's like we're waiting for it to happen in our district.
So I guess, Mr. Jagger, what I meant by that statement was the behavioral concerns that would create problems, that to me is what the AR addresses. So, for example, if tomorrow 5 individuals who have always been male in the buildings have now decided that they want to go and they show up in the ladies' room because, like you said, the door is open or something like that, that still would be an infraction, a behavioral infraction, because their intention was with malfeasance.
Okay.
So a behavioral issue with regards to there is no open door policy. It's not what's happening. It's not actual.
I'm not saying it's an open door policy. I'm saying the door is open for anybody to be able to say, hey, I'm this, hey, I'm that.
But-
I understand what you're saying about the malfeasance and totally agree with that. Somebody that tries to use this for malicious purposes, yes, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But say, what happens if somebody transfers from another district? It's their first day here. Hey, I identify as this.
Yeah.
Who's going to vet that? Who determines this is on a consistent basis?
Right. Well, that's a valid point. You know, there's 3,000 scenarios. You could come up with a whole bunch of different samples of what ifs, right? So to me, it still comes back to a behavioral issue. It still comes back to what the intention is. So I think that we view it differently, I think. But to me, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, I'm still confused as to your focus is on the what if, which I appreciate because we should be proactive versus reactive, 100%. But to me, the AR is a proactive way to enable not just teachers, by the way, but other students from seeing things. If they see something, they also need to say something, and it behooves the community of the whole school to be able to step up and say, you know, there's a way that people are expected to behave when they're inside this building.
I understand that. It's just so many people. You see the news, you see everything. There's so many people using this as for malicious intentions.
Yeah,
so
I agree with
it's
that.
hard to believe that
It's heartbreaking, actually.
you
Yeah.
don't want to be more proactive with the vetting process to try and prevent something like that happening. Like, I understand it's a behavior issue for the maliciousness, but it should be something that's thought more proactively about.
So I guess from a devil's advocate standpoint, what would you think would eliminate the issues that you see by way of a written word?
I mean, honestly, policy 720 would have been good, but still that doesn't affect the maliciousness of people.
Right.
So written word is nothing. So I'm just saying the written word we have right now in the administrative regulation is pretty vague, so it should be a lot tighter.
Right, so Dr. Russell's still going to make revisions. So I guess, is there a way for you to be more explicit with the vetting process, as Mr. Jagger is?
Let me look into that, and let me look at some other documentation from other districts as examples, and let me see what I might propose for consideration.
So for me, as far as like safety goes for my child, if I know that the building adults, the teachers, the administrators, the counselors, have the AR in place to allow them to discipline those that have bad intent, that to me is a comfort, because we can only control so many things. You know, I sit and wait for my kid to go through double doors before I drive away, just because that's just the nature of the world we live in right now, I guess, unfortunately. But I guess for me, my peace of mind is knowing that there is a recourse for teachers to take should there be something that goes wrong.
I'll work on it. I'll bring something back.
Wanted to go back to 907. When I read through that, I don't see visitors after hours being addressed at all. So if there's a concert, a basketball game, something on the weekend where visitors are coming into the building, what is the situation for that? Will that be addressed in the AR at some point?
So right now, no, because when students aren't in session, we are less concerned with what individuals are doing in terms of the bathrooms. When kids are in school, our principals prefer that adults visiting the building do not use the multi-use restrooms with children. After school, when there's all sorts of activities happening, we are not regulating in the same way. So the policy does not cover that right now. No.
So may gender non-conforming adults use the bathroom with which they identify after school hours?
Right now, according to our policy language, they would be afforded that accommodation. I don't know that we've actually addressed the question specifically.
And that includes locker rooms. So with the PV hosts, does PV still host swimming lessons?
Yes.
So it's permissible for non-gender conforming adults to use the locker room of their choice on weekends.
Right now, according to the policy language, yes. Yes. So I see where you're going.
Well, and
That wasn't the case with policy 720.
I'm just
Policy 720
trying to
is also
figure things out here.
Yeah, policy 720 is still not removed yet. Is that being removed?
I mean, it was legally removed.
No, it's still on the policy.
So Ms. Widener will take that out.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll remove that. After the board action last week, yes.
So I have a question. If this wasn't addressed in the AR, when are we going to address it in an AR? Because my heart literally just sank. Because the community uses these facilities on the weekends, and including my own family. And Rowan just brought up a great question with the locker room and swimming lessons. So when can we see this be addressed in the AR?
There is not an AR for 907 at this point.
Are we planning to have one?
There isn't a plan right
Okay.
now.
Okay, thank you. That answers the question.
To go along with Mr. Keenan's statement, I'm sure many people have seen in the news recently, 50-year-old man in swimming tournaments with 8 to 13-year-olds. So you should really think about that.
I just want to clarify that, because That's a point of contention with me. So that was yeah, it's on. That was in Canada. That wasn't a public school, nor was it a private school. It was it would be like Lower Perk Little League, because that's an organization that I'm still part of. It would be like Lower Perk Little League allowing because we rent fields from the school district. It would be like a league that rents something from the school district, allowing someone who was older to claim that he identified as a child. It's not necessarily. I just want to that particular point about the Canadian swim team was not a public nor private school. It was a swim league that rented a pool from a public school.
So, so we had just said that 109 and 907 we're going to move forward, but with these questions on 907, what I think it's important to have guidelines with regard to our visitors into the building. I think school hours are one thing. I think the agreements, Mr. Weaver, that you work out with the folks that use our buildings after hours, I would like to understand how, what the buy-in we get from that is. Because they're not district-run activities. Concerts are one thing, but I'm talking about other outside, basketball, things like that. So I'm assuming that we always have a buy-in that says, as you're using our facilities, these are the expectations that we're setting out, et cetera. But if there's nothing that's codified in language as to what the expectations are, there's no way to police it.
You are correct. AR 707 handles all of our rentals.
707?
707.
Yeah.
Which is aligned with policy 707. So the AR there directly addresses those particular issues. And the organizations are responsible to uphold the school district's policies and procedures at all times. In addition, there are additional requirements such as the pool has a list, the track has a list. They have to maintain the facilities in general. So there are areas that are provided to those organizations that rent our spaces that they have to follow.
So what is the consequence if something should happen? Where's the liability lay?
So they do issue a certificate of insurance, liability to indemnify the school district while they're on their premises at all times. Those are registered and filed. And it could lead to the complete elimination of their ability to rent facilities from Perkiomen Valley School District.
And so then the folks that are in charge of any particular event are aware of the fact that if something happens.
That is correct.
Okay.
So let's just use this as a frame of reference. How is this any different than the mask policy that applied to everybody who used the building during school hours, after school hours, and on weekends?
The mask policy stipulated that it was for the building at all times.
Correct. Why can't this?
Why can't this what?
The policy, the AR, say the same thing.
AR is not a policy.
So this is an AR. This isn't an AR.
So why can't we make it a policy?
You mean you want policy 907 to be for the building?
I'm asking the difference because, well, I know now the difference between an AR and a policy. It's gray. My question is that how, I just think that this is leaving us open to a huge issue. I think we're inviting trouble if we're not having this cover the entire, our buildings the entire time, weekends, like all the time, just like we did with masks.
So again, back to what Mr. Reader just explained, it is the burden of enforcement is on the person, is on the group that is.
No, but you would force what she's saying is if the policy is 24/7, then the rental has to follow the policy.
But he just explained that that's what happens. That's the practice right now.
But our policy is not 20. She's saying our policy stops at 3:45.
Okay. So I understand the concern. So here's an idea. Let me take back the concerns, because part of the purpose in bringing these other policies and administrative regs up was to address the concerns, and maybe an administrative reg that says adults to include parents/guardians shall be the only adults eligible to use locker rooms when students are using locker rooms after school hours, or something like that. So let me work on something, and I'll come back to the committee as well as our board in an effort to, again, afford all students and individuals uphold their rights, but also address some of the concerns that individuals have.
Well, but also, just looking at the policy and what it says along those lines, also after hours, you don't have to consistently identify to use the bathroom of the opposite gender, whether you're a student or an adult.
Right. Okay.
That's just what this AR says.
Are you referring to policy 907?
Well,
sorry.
I don't know if I'm looking at
Okay.
both of them. I'm going back and forth. So,
Okay. All right. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, no, after school hours though, we're with both of the bathrooms and locker rooms. So I'm looking at 907, and what is the restriction on gender non-conforming people who do not consistently identify as the opposite gender from using restrooms and locker rooms after hours?
Yeah. There's
no, I
right.
mean, not that you could ever figure out the limitation, but there's no stated limitation for what it's worth.
Yeah, I understand. Your point is well taken. Let me work on it, and I'll come back with something
I just think
updated.
he's looking for a clear delineation, in my opinion, Mr. Keenan. So, for instance, if we have a male teacher coaching the female lacrosse team, right? There's the delineation to what access that male teacher has inside the locker room when the girls are getting changed.
Understood. Yes, thank you.
So I guess, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe it is the recommendation to hold 907 and not move it to first reading, but to come back with some additional language or considerations, either through the policy or an AR.
So I guess, yeah, I agree that the after hours piece of things, I have some concerns about that language not being clear. With regards to the delineation that Mr. Keenan mentions, I don't know. Again, it's all visitors. It doesn't call out any one section of, it's a standalone policy for visitors. It doesn't qualify who the visitors are. So there wouldn't necessarily be. So are you looking for a separate call out within the visitors policy of a subset of visitor? Is that what you're suggesting? Because right now it doesn't, visitor is an umbrella, right? So any visitor, these are the guidelines for visitors. It doesn't say if you're a man visitor or a woman visitor or a transgender identifying visitor.
I think he's looking for something after 245.
With regards to visitors. So what I'm saying, go ahead, Mr. Keenan.
Well, there's nothing after 2:45. It's just during
Right.
the
So,
school day.
and I agree with you that there should be something in here with
There
regards
should
to
be
visitors
something
in our
with regard
buildings.
to visitors and students. So once 2:45 hits, then anybody
Can do
can
anything
do anything.
based on it being absent in this policy.
Well, absent in the policy and the AR. So yes.
Okay. So I guess that's my point. What I'm saying is visitors, and I don't think it should be a free-for-all after hours by any means. I think it should be very clear what the expectations are for those that use our buildings. But I'm also hearing you say that you want clarification as to what visitors can use what after hours.
Well, I'm
Because
talking about the policy that
right. So I guess
that
what I'm trying to
appears
get at is
to
that, right.
allow people
The
to
language is
use the
absent.
bathroom with which they identify. And honestly, in this one and in the bathroom policy, it's not, it doesn't speak to adults using
Which bathroom? I'm sorry.
during the day or after hours.
What do you mean the bathroom policy?
Sorry, the bathroom administrative regulation.
Oh, the administrative
Doesn't
regulation.
speak, it actually doesn't speak to that. It's just, it's open. I'm wondering, but then we have 103, which says there'll be no discrimination and anybody can use the bathroom with which they identify. I mean, I'm worried about your AR running afoul of actually 103, but that's my minutia on the topic of discrimination. I'm looking for guidance as to what is the school's position on gender non-conforming people using the bathrooms after hours.
Okay, that's different than visitors, though. So
All people, including visitors.
my impression of that is, so visitors to me means someone visiting the building.
So what
I don't
Rowan's-
care
what-
if you're
what-
purple,
what-
green.
What Rowan's trying to get to
I'm
is
a
the
visitor
question
right
at hand.
now.
Okay, so the previous policy, right, stated that X and Y had access to the bathroom and in the locker room 24/7. It was a flat policy, the building at all times. The new AR states that the bathrooms, transgender and gender nonconforming students have access to the bathrooms that they continually identify as through a 24/7 period. It says during the day, adults only have access to no gang bathrooms, just single bathrooms. This policy then says specifically that the locker rooms are only mandated during the day. So you have an AR which again, it's not the policy. We just talk policy as board members. There's currently no policy at the school district level, in Mr. Keenan's eyes, and probably my eyes right now, that stipulate who has access to the locker room at 2:45. Now, it's different when you rent property. So, for instance, I decide to rent the school district. You don't get access to the entire building. You get access to, let's say I rent the gymnasium. Well, that doesn't mean I have access to the bathroom on the 3rd floor. That doesn't mean I have access to the locker room or showers. Maybe if I rent the pool, then I do. So you're stipulated by what you have access to, but you don't get access to the whole kit and caboodle, right? So what Mr. Keenan is looking for is, let's say an organization rents the pool area and the swim team. Normally, you have to abide by all rules that the school district has through policy. So, for instance, you couldn't drink. It's just against the policy of the school district that you would allow drinking. We know that's a policy because that's written in policy. We don't know at this time who has access to the bathroom or the locker room.
So I guess.
Because we have a discrimination policy
Yeah, right.
that they have to, that we have a discrimination policy with an AR that says that the bathrooms will be used by anyone
protected class.
transgender
Right.
or protected class, but
Right.
not the locker room.
Right.
That's what I mentioned at the meeting.
Which is why I brought up the
Yeah.
AR revision
I
situation.
called it
I think-
discrimination light.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, I think your point was well taken there. I think it was an oversight. I don't think that was an intentional, because your point being that it needs to be consistent language throughout. So I guess in this, because I'm reading this only as a visitor's policy and nothing about protected classes is listed at all, if maybe under this visitor restroom section, there be maybe an allowance of a blurb about protected classes, and then cross-reference it back. Go ahead, Mrs. McGee.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate. So if a group is renting our pool, and what I'm hearing people worried about and asking for, say I brought my 8-year-old son to the pool, he's not allowed in the women's room, or so and so forth, because they're saying that if you say there's malicious intent for someone using whatever bathroom for whatever reason, or locker room, like there are nuances.
She's right. This policies are not normally for renters.
Yeah,
Renters have to cover, as someone who used to rent, renters have to cover their own insurance. This policies that we see here are really for PIAA and events that the school district runs. If Shona decides that she's going to run an organization and that's going to rent out the pool, she can do whatever she wants with her organization based off of the facilities that we rent to her. If a situation happens that something happens where someone is injured, they're going to go after the insurance provided
Right.
by
That
her
was my
organization.
question about
Correct.
that, right.
This stuff is really about the activities that the school district runs outside of 245, not who you rent to.
So then that's a point then needs to be clearly spelled out as well with regards to district-run after-school activities. Or sponsored, right.
Because you either have district-run
Oh, right, if it was
activities
a dance.
or rented
Right.
activities.
Right. I mean, if it was a dance and it was after hours
That's
and
a
the
district-run
homeschool-
event,
right,
yeah.
Right. Okay, that's an important delineation then, because I think I understand the fear part of it, but I guess how do we put that in the language that will actually be enforceable?
You can't do it by renters. There's a whole
Right.
35 pages that
Right.
you click onto that
Right.
that states that when
Right.
you rent the facility.
Right. And the expectations set, therefore. Okay. Go ahead.
Wouldn't the expectation set for the school day extend into school run events? Like the same policy, that you expect the same behavior from the,
I think the concern, and I think we have to really unpack this, the concern would be visiting adults here at night for swimming, for example, that end up in restrooms where children are changing, but maybe they're changing and they are of different biological sexes. I think that is part of the concern that I'm hearing.
shouldn't they be in the changing room, in the locker room, not
Well,
in the restroom?
Well, I think that's where some of the questions are. Just, are we looking out for sometimes when those situations might arise where children would be in a locker room and unsupervised, or where adults might also be changing and they are of different biological sexes? I think that's the question. And I think I'd really like an opportunity to consider how we look at after-school hours and adults in the building when there is a blending of adults and children.
I think that I understand what you're going for. I understand what they're going for too, as well.
Yeah.
I think to me comes down to putting it into language that's enforceable, or an expectation that's enforceable. That we don't have the same level of supervision and staff for after-school activities that are district-run as we do throughout the school day. So I think that there needs to be a separate policy aligned with visitors that come into the building. Because, again, keep in mind, Shona, that the adults that come into the building during the day, we have the Raptor system, obviously, but if they're actually participating in events in the district, they have to have clearances on file. They have to really be vetted.
Yep.
That's not the case for after-hours activities. And I think that there's some, like what Dr. Russell said about unpacking it, I think there's some significant trauma triggers that can really come up with the fact that you don't really want there to be just adults going in and out of every area after hours, not signed in.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a valid concern. I'm wondering how we'll codify it.
I'll work
I
on it.
said, being the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
No.
No, the questions are helpful.
I do have another question though. Would it be helpful, or would it be available, or a thought to develop a task force specifically developed to research for the LGBT and transgender community regarding policy? And that goes along with maybe safety and operations.
Well, I would defer to Ms. White. She is the chair of the policy committee. I will offer, I'm always open to conversations about how to keep our students safe. And that's really what this is about. Concerns and suggestions for how that might happen, or that we do as much as possible to be proactive in that regard. So if individuals have topics of conversation that they would like to engage around, happy to do it. and if Ms. White determines that a task force would be helpful, I can engage a group of people. I'm happy to do it.
So,
Sounds like a whole lot of extra expense on taxpayers.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jagger, what would be? Well, we have committee
Volunteer
meetings
basis.
we have committee, we're all here. I don't know that this is an extra expense on taxpayers.
Yeah.
Any committee that is open to the public is just another,
It's free. We're
yeah,
volunteers.
it's just like,
Right, it's another meeting
it's like
out,
an open
yeah.
forum. It wouldn't be anything that would be,
But
Chargeable.
hiring in a task force just for this one specific cause, that would be
I
an
don't-
expense, wouldn't it?
No, she didn't mean hiring a task force. She meant
The volunteer
volunteers.
basis.
no, like I think you mean like maybe a group of parents, the GSA, maybe some student advocates, maybe
An
some
ad hoc.
Yeah, the administrative. So I know that we had the DEI task force that was working to develop, the language and with regards to, say, for example, 832. I know they did work around that. So it may be a good avenue to get some of the, I want to focus in policy on policies presented, right? So if I'm actually not opposed to that idea. I don't know if you feel like that would be something with regard to community engagement, like Dr. Champagne Lee would maybe work on, or I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah. How about if I start with our admin team and all the feedback that I've received and come back to the committee, and then if a task force would be appropriate, happy to entertain that and consider the engagement. If that would be okay, I'd really like to take some of the information back to admin. They've been also very helpful in providing some feedback and guidance around what they believe will serve their students best in the buildings. So let me do that, and we'll go from there.
So I guess my question would be, so you have something to go back to, what theoretically, what would the conversation, what would our agenda look like for that? Would it be a community task force? Would it be a board engagement task force? Would it be a community task force? And would it be to focus only on like this, or would you want to focus on what would be the end game? I guess that's my question. What's the end game of the task force?
To have the most robust protective policies for our students across the board.
Okay. So not specific to protected classes per se.
Not specific, but it would be surrounding that.
Okay.
There is a lot to unpack there.
Sure.
There absolutely is a lot to unpack there. And I think with the research done with scholastic backing and research data, it's a lot. And to put that on the board itself or the policy committee itself, you'll be there forever.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think maybe a task force would be helpful. But the reason I asked for the end game is to make sure that if we were to develop it, who would be the best person to facilitate it? I guess that's where my thought about it is.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is a task force. This is a working committee. We've spent a year on Policy 109. We've spent 6 months on 815. I would really like the opportunity to take some of the feedback and start with the admin team, if we can all be comfortable with that, and let's come back and let's see where we need to go from there. But again, I think your intention, if I understand it, was for this to be a working group of those interested. And if individuals come with more detailed information, if administration needs to do more research, happy to do that. And there are great examples out there of other policies that we can look to and we can reference and we can consider. School districts in Montgomery County have them. So lots of references at our fingertips that can contribute to our conversations. But I want to believe this is the working task force. This is why we're here together. I don't know that we need to repeat that. In my professional opinion.
I see what you're saying, Dr. Russell. I guess maybe the only thing I would add was that we have an agenda that we work on, and then we come with the agenda of the things in mind that we're going to discuss. So what would be, in your best case scenario, the best way to get input in development of a working agenda for policy, other than
So I see the forum that you have initiated since January to be just that. So we bring an agenda forward, people have it in advance, it's public 48 hours in advance, and there are opportunities to read through and think about what will be discussed. If it isn't completed in that first committee night that it's on the agenda, it continues into the next month. So it's not necessarily it's on the agenda once and then we're going to move forward. We attempt to be very thoughtful and methodical about what appears on the agenda, and sometimes these items do take time. And I think I really appreciate that this group takes the time to carefully think about policy language and now even AR language in the interest of our students.
So would it be fair then, if there's somebody that wants to bring forward a suggested topic for policy, to do that via email?
So I think we're getting far afield of how policy committee and
Yep.
policy development typically works. I am not in favor of an agenda. My
Driven-
experience, my
driven
personal
by the
opinion.
community, right.
Exactly. It is
Yep.
driven by the board. This is the board's work, and we need to stay on task with the review cycle, with PNNs that come out, and with local policies that raise concerns. To open it up and then have items be added during a committee meeting, I do not believe will serve policy development well.
Okay, and I agree with that. So I was sort of devil's advocate to see what you'd say, and I didn't mean to. I felt like I needed to put somebody on the spot tonight. So that was you too. So I guess because what I'm hearing though is there's a need or a want to have more grassroots work that would maybe be a precursor to it showing up at policy. And so I think that that's where I think there's this thought process that if there was a task force, like a convening, that they could work through some of the details and then bring it to present and say, hey, look, we've done this and this is the, because there's a lot of legwork that goes into the development. What I want to focus on and what I tried to do in January and then this month is really focus on what I see this common thread of behaviors and how do we make the policies that we currently have more robust and really be able to have the most fidelity possible in terms of carrying them out. So, but what I'm hearing is there's something missing from what exists.
So at this point, I'm not sure I see that, but administration will defer to you as the presiding officer and follow your guidance when it comes to developing policy. In my experience, this committee and the committee forum that you have opened up now actually to include more voices has been supportive of and contributing to the development of policy. But again, if we feel as if a task force would be helpful, I'm always open to conversation with individuals. I just don't know that we need another group separate from this group because of the way it is now structured to talk more or in different ways. That information can be brought to this group and discussed.
And it could also be brought to this group, I guess, theoretically, from other committees, right? We have safety and ops. If something comes out of that conversation, maybe that would spill over into policy. We have wellness, that could spill over into policy. So some of the topics that are addressed in different committees could also find their way back here. I just want to let people know their options in terms of having dialogue and developing different thought process.
Right. So good example of that when we started to talk about facility dogs or service dogs. That is a local policy that came into on the agenda, the local policy section. So when something comes up in conversation or is suddenly of concern in the district, it can end up in the local section and then it's discussed. And again, this is the forum within which that typically occurs. There is spillover. Sometimes there are concerns that emerge out of teaching and learning, like gifted services. That has ended up in the local section because there have been aspects to that policy we have wanted to review and talk through. Anything really can end up in the local section if it is of some concern in some way in the district.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted it to be very clear about how it gets developed. And I don't know that I understand the reasoning for asking for just to have time to only talk about focused items as opposed to a agenda of business.
And so if there is motivation to do that, you know that I'm happy to meet with you, Mrs. McGee, and talk through some of the additional information or even some of the research that you've resorted to and referenced in the past. I'm happy to look at some things that are new in your view and could contribute.
Did that answer the question? Sort of. I don't think, it's not an off the table. It seemed like it was a, let's see what we can get done.
Maybe a discussion at another time.
Discussion at another time. Fair enough. Does anyone have anything else? Ms. Lufton, I saw your hand.
So I'm wondering if what we need here isn't necessarily something that's policy related, but something that is also being woven into the anti-bullying efforts, and if there's a need for more discussion and engagement around some of the anti-bullying programs that are coming out. And I know that those were discussed, and there are, if I recall correctly, from what was presented at the board meeting, that there are some pilot programs, but I think maybe there's just some community interest in having a better understanding about what's happening during the school day beyond, at a different level than the policy level discussion, to understand how to make all students feel safe from a social and emotional component as well. And I think that maybe that's where the discussion needs to be. And so we had previously had the Partners for Equity and Inclusion, and with Mr. Willis's departure, I know that I'm not sure if that's something that might get up and running again in the future, or if there needs to be, a Partners of Equity and Inclusion 2.0, or, just something of that nature that isn't necessarily designed to be developing policy, but just to have conversation to inform administration about issues with climate and things that are happening within the district.
Okay, I see what you're saying now, and I appreciate the point. And if it is something other than the development of policy, I understand and appreciate what you're saying. That is a possibility under the leadership of Dr. Champagne-Lee. That's different from what my impression was. And if I mistook,
You felt like it was making a separate
a mini policy
committee.
committee. And so I apologize if I misunderstood that. That was what I was taking from the suggestion. We have wellness committee where we do talk about some of those things. However, under the leadership of Dr. Champagne-Lee, similar to Mr. Willis and myself before that, we could consider those sorts of conversations where there is a forum to express concerns. Yes.
So that's where I was getting at about other committees rather.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
No,
I
we don't need
misunderstood.
to do policy
That was
twice.
my mistake.
It's really just the one time
My
isn't
mistake.
more than enough, like at all.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. It's like extra enough. And it's only 5 of 8. This is really thrilling. Okay. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add, question? If you're writing the note down about
Got it.
okay, got it. You thought that Mrs. McGee really wanted to really dive into policy twice a month. Oh, says Judy and Mr. Liggett. Okay, so we are at the meeting dates. We said we're in March. 5.03 is notice of video disclaimer. If there is nothing else, no other comments, questions, concerns, I will rule adjournment.
Thank you.